Okay, Grandad, so I've got here that you were born on the 4th of July 1928. And you've quite rightly told me earlier that that means that you were not around during World War One. So your parents were, and I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about your parents, about your mum and your dad.
Well, we start with my mother. My mother came from Heswell, or next door to Barnston. Barnston was the name of the house here. But she came to London, or to Sidcup, with people called McLaren. He was a banker from London, and they came down, and she came down as cook, cook housekeeper, and that's where she met my father.
Did she work in London?
No, she worked in Sidcup, as their house was in Hadlow Road, Sidcup, and then they moved, as they advanced in the bank, they moved up to Blackheath, so she was there, and I think she was at Blackheath when they got married. So they did their courting in Greenwich Park, I think.
Oh, that's nice.
My father, he came from a little village called Castle Camps in Cambridgeshire, which is right in the corner where Essex, Cambridge and Suffolk meet. His father was a thatcher.
Okay.
And one of my father's brothers worked with my father, and when he left school at 14, he went to work with them. But when he was 15, his father died, quite suddenly I think, and his brother said there wasn't enough work for him to keep my father on. So one of his other brothers was a coachman for a big family in Chislehurst, and he came down, Uncle Harry that was, and he found my father a job in Main Road in a coach builder's called Bentley's. That's right next to Christchurch there, and he was there a short while, I don't know how long, but then he did various other jobs and finished up as a bricklayer come handyman with a firm called Webb's, which was in Church Road, Sidcup.
Okay.
Worked for them until 1936, when he set up in business on his own.
In building business?
In building business.
Yeah.
But during his time there, during the First World War, he wasn't fit enough to go in the services, so he spent some time working in Woolwich Arsenal, and then a latter part, when he came out of that, he set up a small window cleaning business in Chislehurst, so that when my Uncle Harry came out of the army, he would have a job to go to.
What did your Uncle Harry do in the army?
I couldn't tell you what. I think it was something to do with horses, but...
He came back all right then?
He came back all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And then, so he started his business as a builder here, and then I've got here that he then bought the land here that Barnston's on.
Well, he bought the land. Well, my mother was the big driving force. They bought the land. We were living then in Black Horse Road, which is just behind us here, and they bought this piece of land and borrowed enough money to buy that, and then they got a small mortgage, and he built this place while he was still working for somebody else. He got somebody in to do the brickwork and somebody to do the plastering and general carpentry work, except for the roof. And my Uncle Tom, that's my mother's brother, came down from Heswell one weekend and did the roof, all the woodwork on the roof in one weekend.
That's a big job. The house as it stands now?
Pretty well much the same, the main part of the house.
Well, that's quite a big job for one weekend.
Yeah. Well, but you could do it.
Yeah. And then, what happened with the house then? Did you move into it here?
Yeah, we moved into it here then, but he was still, at that time, still working for the Webbs, but they had, the land went a bit further. There was hut on it. There was the Tock H, which was a First World War little church. Well, the Tock H was something that started during the First World War for helping the soldiers when they were on leave in France. So they had that bit of land, and then a Captain Downs came along. He wanted to buy it to build a hall for, what are they called? Crusaders, which was a girls' church society thing. I can't remember exactly what it was.
It's an ambitious name.
Yeah, but anyway, my father said, yeah, he said, I'll sell it to you on condition that you let me build the new hall. So that was when he first started in business on his own then, to build that.
So he built this house first, then the one next, then the hall
right.
next door.
That's it. Mm.
And then, while we're on building, you've built the house. We know you built the house next door because we were around when you built that one. Mm. And then you built the other two at the end of the road.
Well, when I was here at a younger time, before I was married, there was the next house down in Church Road was owned by a chap called Harry Longdon. And when he died, I had the opportunity to buy the house with a bit of land adjacent to it, and subsequently to pay for for what I paid for the house, I built the house on the corner and got rid of all the debt on it, which left me with another plot free. And at a later time, in your time, at 78, I decided I'd build the house. So we built the house next door with your help and your dad's help, and yeah, and there, that's it.
Okay.
Sold that. My father was, when he was first married to Emily, and they had one son, Arthur. And when Arthur was 6 months old, Emily died. I think she had pneumonia or TB. I don't know what it was. But anyway, so my father was left with this, and some people in Birkbeck Road took him in, and they adopted him. So that was the end of Arthur in our family, really. So then my father then got remarried to my mother, Florence, and they had, first of all, this was during the First World War, and my brother was born during the First World War, Selwyn. Selwyn John, always known in the family as Selwyn, but outside he liked to be called John. So John, that was Selwyn first, then Kath was born, Kath, then Gwen, Betty, who's still alive, and then myself. I think I was a mistake. I'm not so sure that Betty wasn't, but Arthur used to appear quite often. Mother never really had a lot of time for Arthur. Arthur was homosexual, and this was the time before it was accepted, and he got prosecuted a few times.
Did he?
I used to finish up paying for his fines. Not all the time, but anyway, that was in the past. Yeah.
All right. What was his job? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but he must have had a job. I don't remember what he did.
Did he live locally?
No, he lived all his life. He lived pretty well until he died. He lived down in Birkbeck Road.
Oh, right.
He married at one time.
Did he?
When he was getting on a bit. He married Mary. That's another story.
I was going to say, that's an interesting story.
Yeah.
All right, and what about Selwyn?
Oh, Selwyn. Selwyn was the brains of the family. And he got a scholarship to Eltham College, which was a pretty big achievement at the time. Because we all went to Birkbeck Road School, which was the church primary school.
Right.
But he didn't do much at Eltham. I think once he got there, he just sat back. I don't think he achieved anything. Left there at age 16, I think. Don't know whether he'd taken any exams or what the situation was then. And then he got a job with a firm called Hitchcock Williams in St Paul's Churchyard, and they were drapers and that sort of thing. But it wasn't long before he was taken under the wing, or more than taken under the wing, by one of the directors, George Williams. And George Williams sort of, I don't know quite what the arrangement was there, but I think Selwyn swung both ways. And he left home then and went to live up in London in various places.
Did he marry?
At a later stage, he got married. Well, during the war, he had various girlfriends. I mean, one was, I can't think of their names now. One was a drum major in the Air Force Band. Another was a Wren. Yeah, he used to bring all sorts of girlfriends down. And when the war broke out, Selwyn was very quick, and he joined the Fire Brigade.
Oh.
I think the idea was he wouldn't be in a lot of trouble with the Fire Brigade. He wouldn't have to leave London. But anyway, it sort of backfired on him because he was really in the midst of it in the Blitz.
Yeah.
He had quite a rough time in the Blitz. But that was Selwyn. After the war, he tried various bits and pieces of jobs. One time he was a representative for one of these the fire extinguisher firms.
Oh, okay.
One of his big things when he used to go round demonstrating, he'd have his hat, pour a bit of petrol on top of the hat, set it on fire, and then put it out with the fire extinguisher. I think he left it a bit late once, but
he wasn't wearing it at the time, surely.
He set his pocket alight, didn't he, one Christmas?
Oh yeah. He smoked a pipe, and he put his pipe more than once into his jacket pocket, still alight, burnt a hole in the jacket. But another job he had, a short time he worked for a tool firm as a representative selling tools, and then one of his last jobs he did this artificial turf, and he did a fair bit with that, but how that finished up I don't know.
He must have been good with the talk thing, because he sounds like someone who just went around talking anyone in a bar.
He played a lot. He was a great golfer. He was captain of Highgate Golf Club for quite some time. For 2 years after that, the golf club got burnt down, and he was there while they had to raise the money to rebuild it. I remember at the time that 2 or 3 sets of golf clubs appeared. Yeah, so he married Mary, and Mary, I think he married Mary because he thought her father had a lot of money, but just shortly after he married Mary, her father went broke.
Oh, bad luck.
And Mary had a higher job in the office of British Home Stores, So I think she finished up with quite a reasonable pension, and I've got a feeling that's what they lived on, but that was that. But yeah, he was a good brother. I didn't see an awful lot of him, but
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. And I suppose Kath. Yeah, I remember Auntie Kath, but only in her later life, not.
Yeah,
not
well, Kath was
younger.
quite had just a normal health until she was about 8. And then the story goes that she caught,
Spanish flu, wasn't it?
yeah, it was where the Spanish flu, they called it sleepy sickness, but anyway, it was encephalitis of the brain, and she gradually deteriorated. I mean, when I was quite young, I could manage to walk her up the stairs behind, but she gradually deteriorated, and sometime after I got married and Jean was about, we managed to get her into the Cheshire home over at Bromley. She was there for about 25 years before she died.
Yeah.
Very happy over there.
But she, for years and years and years, she'd been in this room here.
Yeah, well, my father built that, what is now the office. He built that on as a room for Kath, so she could.
Oh, so she had her independence there for a bit.
Yeah.
That's nice. And then Gwen, I remember quite a lot about Gwen.
Gwen?
Yeah.
No, Gwen was a character.
She had a very interesting life. So she was involved during World War II, wasn't she, in the GPO?
Well, before that, she went as a nursemaid come housekeeper for a couple of families in Sidcup. And then she worked for Victor Plant, who's a newsagent and tobacconist in the High Street, and she started off with him a coach booking, which was at the origin of Plan Travel, which was a travel agent. So they used to do coach bookings and holiday bookings and that. And then, when the war came along, she was called up, and she went to work with, what's the...
It's over at Fort Halstead, wasn't
she
it?
worked at Fort Halstead for...
GCHQ.
It's a cipher people, GCH, no.
Bletchley Park. Sorry.
Bletchley Park. They used to take all the messages in when they were sent from there to by dispatch rider up to Bletchley Park. So Gwen, at one time we went to Bletchley Park and they were saying about what they'd done and all the rest, and she piped up, she said, yeah, it was all very well, but she said you couldn't have done your job without us.
No, I don't believe that was Auntie Gwen.
So
She never
didn't
said that.
entirely win the war. And then at one time during the war, she drove a WVS canteen around the area to the ACAC sites, the anti-aircraft sites and that.
Really?
So she was quite busy.
Busy.
Then after the war, she got a job at the GPO.
Mm.
She finished up as a supervisor there. And then when she retired from there, she got a job as telephonist at Clifford's, the garage in Sidcup.
Yeah.
She married Arthur,
Charles first.
She married Charles first during the war. He was in the army and worked for the Army Pay Corps at Footscray. And he cleared off from somebody else, and she married Arthur. I don't want to say a lot about Arthur. Never got on very well with Arthur. That's that. Gwen she was a good sister. Did my ironing. She said, this was when I was widowed, she said, I'll do your ironing all the time you're working. So I decided I wouldn't stop working.
Yeah. And then there's Betty.
Oh, there's Betty, yeah. Well, Betty, she's 2 years older than me. She married, during the war, because Betty won the war as well. During the war she was working with Sir Robert McAlpine. They were big contractors and their office was in Park Lane. She was in the office there. She was a shorthand typist and secretary. And during the war she went on a couple of sites in various parts of the country building airfields. I don't think she did the concreting, but she... Anyway, that was that. So Betty won the war as well. Then she met during the war Ralph, who was in the Royal Army Medical Corps. He wasn't a doctor, but he was in the office side of it, whatever you call it. And that's it, and they had 2 children. Ralph went off to Burma. He was away for a couple of years and then came back after the war. He was a librarian and worked in Sidcup and then in Orpington. That was it. They had 2 children, Judy and Stephen. And Betty is now, I wouldn't say she's lost her marbles, but she's a bit forgetful, and she's in a nursing home in Sittingbourne near Judy. But she's been quite difficult. Latest episode was she'd bitten a couple of people, and when the mayor came to visit, grabbed the chain and broke the chain. So she's
leaving her mark.
She's leaving her mark. Yeah.
And so, during that time, during the wartime, how old would you have been?
I was 11 when the war started.
What are your memories of that?
Well, I can remember actually when when war was declared. I remember Mr. Chamberlain coming back, and then his speech when he said if nothing else was heard by 11 o'clock or whatever, nothing was heard, so we are now at war with Germany. I was in the choir and went over to the church in the choir, and we'd only been in there about 10 minutes and the siren went off, and everybody just walked out of the church and ran home.
Must have been scary.
So nobody knew what to expect, and what is now our dining room was the garage, and in the garage was an inspection pit down. So I can remember we all got down in the pit there because you didn't know what to expect, and there for about 10 minutes and the all clear went, and after that it was a sort of phony time. Nothing happened for some months after that. That was that. Then the bombing did start. We had various bombing at various stages. The nearest bomb was a V2, which was the rocket, and that landed quite near the end of the war, and that landed on what was the builders, Knight's Builders, next to Shepherd's Garage, just off the high street. That killed 8 people there. Didn't do a lot of damage to us. I think a few tiles off the roof and cracked one window. So we were very, very fortunate there. But there were quite a lot of bombs quite close.
It was a sea mine dropped on by the park, wasn't it?
No, we didn't have a mine there. We had quite a few flying bombs. That's what the Doodlebugs, that was the V1s. During the war, one of the biggest ones close here was at Fisher's Farm and Main Road, and that was a mine. Now, I don't know whether that was a sea mine or what. They were dropping anything they'd got at that stage. You could tell if it was a sea mine by the next day when you were, because as kids we used to go around and pick up shrapnel and all sorts. If it was a sea mine, you'd find lots of pieces of silk, green silk, which had been the parachute that it dropped on. But that killed a few people there.
Yeah, I bet.
Didn't one of your friends lose fingers by picking something up?
Yeah. And of course, that was when we were at school. They had these anti-personnel things, like fountain pens and various things they'd drop. And we were warned as kids never to pick these things up. But he picked one up just down at bottom of Wren Road there and blew the tops off all his fingers.
Well, they dropped them out of the aeroplanes.
They came out of the airplane, yeah.
Really? Didn't know about that. Well, just little things that look like pens and stuff.
Things, yeah. Mm.
Well, that's wicked.
Yeah, oh, it was wicked.
Oh, they're not exactly memories of World War One, but you know some information about that.
Well, the hospital close to us was Queen Mary's, which was built during the First World War, and it was used mainly for facial injuries, and that was the start of the plastic surgery. I know there was who the actual was McIndoe or whoever it was. They subsequently finished up at East Grinstead, but that's where it all started. And even when I was a child, after the war, there were still patients, because military patients always had blue uniforms in hospital if they were outside. And you were quite a few you still used to see walking around in blue uniforms with various dressings over their faces and that. And 3 or 4 of my old school friends, their fathers were facial injury patients. You could deform faces and that. And of course, they married local girls. And they could have come from all parts of the country. I mean, there were so many widowed ladies about then, or ones whose their fiancé had been killed in the war, boyfriends and that. So there was a shortage of men at the time. And not that I'm saying that was the reason why they married these people, but there were a lot of widows that I remember and children that lost their fathers in the war. So so that was that, Queen Mary's. Don't remember an awful lot. Well, I was the dummy, I didn't pass the 11 plus. I just hadn't got the same sort of intellect. But I was at Birkbeck Road School, went from there to Alma Road when I failed the 11 plus, which was a secondary modern. It was then called a central school. But after 2 years, without knowing it, I must have passed an exam to go to Dartford Technical College, which was your second chance. But I never remember sitting an exam for it. I think they just selected ones they thought that might be suitable. And we went to Dartford Tech for 2 years. For 2 years. Didn't do much cop there.
What did you study?
Just general. We did technical drawing and maths and English and history, the normal stuff, but it was with a lean towards technical.
Yeah.
Anyway, I decided then, when they wanted to know what I wanted to do, I thought then, as I quite enjoyed carpentry, I'd like to be a pattern maker. Well, a pattern maker makes a wooden replica of what you're going to cast in metal, and then it goes to a foundry and they make a sand mould of this and pour the metal into it. So my old cub mistress, her father was Sir William Lark, and I had cheek enough to go round to see Sir William, and he knew me as a cub. He said, "What do you want?" I said, "I wondered whether you can get me a job." He said, "Well, what do you want to do?" So I said, "I want to be a pattern maker." He said, "All right, leave it to me, I'll see what I can do." So he came up with this. He'd written to various firms that he knew, because he had become a Sir William during the First World War, when on his in the factory he was with, they were producing armaments. So I think he was quite a big, important man for the First World War. And he got me this job with a firm of marine engineers in Gravesend called Sandford's.
Okay.
So I went to Gravesend at the age of 15 and had an interview there, and they said, yes, all right, but we can't put you in the patent shop for a year because we haven't got a vacancy, but you can come and work with the firm. So I did. So then they put me at Sun Wharf, which was in Gravesend, and Sun Wharf, they were adapting Thames barges as mobile floating workshops in preparation for the invasion of France. Anyway, I was there for 6 weeks, and somebody that was at the art school where my mother was caretaker took interest in what I was doing. He said, oh, I know a firm in London that he could start right away as a patent maker's apprentice. So I left Gravesend and got this job with a firm in the Euston Road, Wales.
How old were you?
I was then just over 15. And I was there for about 9 months. Then all of a sudden I decided I didn't want to do that. So gave my notice in, came back on this Friday and said I'd worked the week's notice without saying it. Came back on the Friday and I was then unemployed and said to my parents, I said, well, I've left that job. I don't want to be there. Well, what are you going to do? So I said to my mother, I said, well, I might as well do what my father does.
Oh.
So they picked up the newspaper and they were advertising for apprentices for a firm of builders in Orpington. Phoned them up and got an interview for the Saturday, that's followed Saturday. Went over with my father and I was taken on as a carpenter's apprentice. That was it. And I served my time with them, and I was with them for 9 years, and then I left there and joined my father. I was with him for 3 years before he died.
That's nice. So you took over your dad's business when he died then?
Well, I'd taken it over before really, because it was pretty well, he wasn't well, and he pretty well run it to the ground then. There was nothing there much. But the name was there and there were customers about, and we never got to be very big, but that was it. One of my oldest memories was a girl called Betty Reynolds. Betty Reynolds was notorious in the district. She was, bearing in mind this was when I was about 5 or 6, she would have been about 13 perhaps, something like that. But she was a bit mentally handicapped, can we say. Anyway, Betty Reynolds was quite a character. The ones that I can remember, one was going into the butcher's shop and asking for something, and when he went into the cold room, she slammed the door, left him locked up in the cold room. That was one time. She'd steal tins of fruit, and we'd go round in the paddock, which was a bit of waste ground at the back. And an old Pantechnicon there, and we used to call that the Tin Lizzie, and she'd give all the kids tin fruit. What else did she get up to? Lots of capers like this. But anyway, I remember my mother saying to me, Betty Reynolds has been taking children on the bus to Lewisham or Bexley Heath and leaving them there. She said, don't have anything to do with Betty Reynolds when she asked you to go So a couple of days later, I'm sitting on the steps of the old St John's Hall, which was in Church Road then. And Betty Randall said to me, she said, "You coming on a bus ride with me to Bexley Heath?" So I said, "My mum says I'm not to go with you on a bus ride because you'll leave me in Bexley Heath." So she turned round and bit my nose and ran off. And that was one of the early memories.
I'm not surprised everyone knew her. What became of her?
Oh, she finished up in one of these mental,
Oh, really?
but not Rampton or one of these places. Yeah. I knew Tommy Rounds, her father, quite well in latter years. Yeah, he was quite a character too. Yeah, what else? Oh, then I joined the choir when I was 7.
Over there?
Over there.
St John's.
Yeah.
And did you ring the bells?
Later, I
Yeah.
was a bell ringer. My father was a bell ringer.
Oh, was he?
Betty was a bell ringer.
You used to feed the rabbits when you were in the choir.
Yeah, well, there was a hatch that went into the organ blower, and we used to take pages out of the hymn books and feed them, so we feeding the rabbits.
And they found your peg recently, didn't they?
I did, yeah.
You did?
I recently, not only a couple of years back, I did some work in the choir vestry and took the old shelving down, and there, written on it above the pegs, one of them has got my name on it as a boy.
Because that church being very integral, your father used to walk along the gutters?
Oh yeah, and they used to clean the gutters, because they're cast iron gutters on a stone corbel, so they're quite safe, but they're only about this wide, and he had no fear of heights at all, and he just walked along with a bucket and a trowel cleaning the gutters. I called the police out once to get him down. I'm all right. I'm all right.
And didn't you go up on top of the steeple?
Oh yeah, well at one time I had to, the
Flashing, was it?
lightning conductor, the screws had come out that was fixed on the wooden cross, and it had bent right over. And the vicar said, "Well, we've got to do something about that." So I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I suppose you've got to put a scaffold up." I said, "No." I said, "I think I know the way up there," because my father had told me at one time he'd gone up there on ladders, and he told me where he put the ladders on the back. There was one up to the gutter, lower gutter, and another up on that slope, and then another one up there, and another one. Anyway, every time you put a ladder up on that, you put a screw eye into the woodwork,
Right.
and tie your rope and tie the ladder to it, so it's quite safe. And I went up there at this later date, found all the old screw eye holes, put my own screw eyes in, and I got right up on the top there, and I was scared stiff. And I was crawling up the top there, and there I saw his name, W. Belsham, S. Phillips, and the date 1928, I think. He'd been up there and scratched on the leg. So I scratched.
Did you scratch
on the
yours?
leg. His son. So whether
How old were you when you went up there?
Oh, I'd be 40s, in my 40s.
That's a big church there to go all the way up to the top of.
It was going to be bigger, but they ran out of money when they built it. It was going to be a steeple on it.
Oh,
So fortunately they ran out of money, it didn't get built.
yeah. It's huge.
That's why it got such a flat sort of top on that thing.
Oh,
The same with Christchurch, they ran out of money,
Mm.
so they never finished their steeple.
So, who's Keith, Granda? Because I've got a note here that he's one of your friends.
Keith,
Mm.
I first met Keith at Birkbeck Road School before we were 11. Didn't really remember him very well, but then we both finished up at Alma Road School with secondary modern, as it is now. and we became friends from then on, and we were friends right until 18 months ago when he died.
Oh, it's a long friendship.
Mm.
Did he live near?
Pardon?
Did he live near here?
Well, he lived in Wren Road then, which is not far. Then when he got married, he moved down to Devon, then to, and lived the rest of his life down in Devon. But that's another story.
Right, so I've got, did you have to do national service?
No, being an apprentice, my national service was everybody that was doing an apprenticeship or anything like that. Their time was deferred until they finished their apprenticeship, and then you would be called up. But I was in a group of 3 months, which for some reason got misplaced. We didn't get called up. Those before went, those afterwards went. And at the time it suited me fine because I was busy and I was working first. I was working abroad a bit then.
Oh, where did you work?
Oh, well, that's to finish the story.
All right then.
And I didn't, but at the time, as I say, it suited me, but I've regretted it ever since.
Really?
I haven't been in. The war was over then.
Yeah.
But all my mates that went and came back, they had lots of stories to tell. But I had finished, when I finished my apprenticeship, I was aged 21, and I was working then in Dublin with the other carpenter's apprentice, Reg. He was over there with me, and we'd said all the time, right from when we first apprenticed, when we finished up, we would get drunk. Wherever we were, we'd get drunk. So our time came. I was just over 21 then, because I hadn't started my apprenticeship with them until I was 16. Normally it would have been 15. But anyway, we were in Dublin, so we took ourselves off into Dublin itself. We were living about a mile out of the centre, and we went on a pub crawl. Well, we had no idea about what we were drinking. I'd had a few drinks before and been drunk before, but never like this. We finished up at this last pub. We started off in a pub called Barry's in Dublin, and I can't think but what the name of the other pubs were. But we finished up in this other pub, which was on the outskirts of Dublin, about a 2-mile walk back to the digs. And I was in the digs. It was a butcher. We were in his digs there. And I remember this long road, I think it's Rathmines it was called, along that area. And it was a long road, and at that time there were all iron railings all the way along there. And we were pulling ourselves along on these railings all the time. The railings were there, we were all right. When the railings stopped, Reg was on the outside, Reg carried on. I fell into the alleyway, which is this, so I fell in there, and I was absolutely stocious. I don't know, it was a very cold night, it was February, and I can remember just 2 chaps coming along and saying, we'll have to move you because if you found the Garda or the police would take you in. So they dragged me along, and I can remember, because I went back and had a look at a later time, there was a telegraph pole there, and they put me in the shadow of this telegraph pole, just like me, and as I say, it was very cold. And they took my watch off, and I can remember saying, that's it, I lost my watch. And the next day I found it was in my pocket, they put it in my pocket. And some period after that, early hours of the morning this would be, I don't know whether it's the same two, but two other chaps came along and found me and pulled me up on my feet and said, where do you live? I said, don't know. And I said, well, anyway, they must have found my address in my pocket. So they lugged me all the way back to this place and knocked on the door, and the landlord came and said, "Oh, Reg is in." So I managed to stagger up the stairs. I was sobering up a wee bit by then. And when I got up there, we had got this one room with one double bed that we had to sleep in. This, because when you're in digs, you never know where you want to, And opposite was the bathroom, the toilet. Anyway, I opened the door to the toilet, and there was Reg. He was sitting on the pan. He was still in this, I couldn't remember it, he was still in this, it was like a teddy bear coat he'd got. It was a really warm coat, but there was blood and vomit all down the front. He had a terrible state. He'd lost all the skin off his nose. Anyway, we managed to roll out of there and roll into bed. I had to get up the next morning because I'd got the keys to the site. So I got up the next morning about 7 o'clock. I was in terrible state. Managed to get to the site, collapsed behind the door in the office, and the manager eventually came. I left Reg, he was still in bed. Manager, he said, "What on earth happened to you?" So I said, "What?" He said, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" He said, "I've gone with you and looked up." I said, "Oh, never thought of that." Anyway, it was quite a story after that one. He took me out and went down to the market and said, "The best thing for this," he said, is an air of the dog, and we had a whiskey, so I was violently sick again. Then we back to the office, and his secretary, who was also his girlfriend, I think, she made me tomato soup, which I immediately brought up again. He took me home. Anyway, I managed to carry on. I got back to work the next day. Reg, who stayed in bed, he was there from the Saturday to the Wednesday. He was still in bed before he finally got up.
Word, that's quite a hangover.
And I retraced our steps, and I found the skin off his nose. It was on the gate post, on the stone pillar entrance to this, our digs, and this stone pillar with this granite top, and there was Reggie's. We didn't put it back on. So that was the end of my apprenticeship. While I was still working over there, the office called and said they wanted me back because I had a really good governor. He trained me, given me the opportunity to do all various things we've been doing, road engineering. Because at this time I was 1 day a week, and then after that 3 nights a week at Woolwich Poly, and I was doing my national certificate and higher national certificate there, and we were doing surveying and levelling and various steelwork and reinforced concrete and building construction. So I'd got a fair grounding in all the various. And, he said, I had to go back to the office, and they said, "Oh well, you're going to Egypt." So we'd got a new system of building with this concrete in a mould that did away with bricklayers, and it was quite quick. And I was to go out there to demonstrate to people out there, hoping that they would take it on. So I was out there the 3 of us went out, the architect and myself and another chap who went as labourer. I don't know why we could have got a labourer out there, but anyway, we were out there 6 or 7 weeks, and then I came back from there and was sent back over to Ireland, and I got called back again, and he said, "You're going to Canada." Yeah. So I went to Canada, and I was there for about another 6 weeks. That was in the winter time.
Which part of Canada?
It was in Montreal.
Oh, lovely.
And as I say, it was thick snow. It was really, really cold out there. It wasn't the right sort of temperature to be doing concrete work. But anyway, that That was that.
Was that all to do the same idea
Same
to
idea.
show to demonstrate?
Yeah, but these were quite a long story from each of those. I mean, from Cairo and from what happened in Montreal. But anyway, I came back from there, and then been back a short while, and they'd got a contract to build 120 houses over in Northern Ireland in Newry, and I was then 23, I think, and the chap they'd got out there running it, it wasn't very successful, and they weren't very happy. So they said, you go over there and look after that job. So then I'm out there, and I was in charge of that at 23, and I was there for 21 months, at the time of my life. I had a wonderful time out there. Came back, and
Is it right every time you came back you had butter in your pockets?
oh yeah, well, I mean, it was the time of rationing over here, so at various times when I came back, I always brought something back. But this particular time, I'd got this, luckily it was a waterproof coat, and I was a terrible traveller, and on the boat, and a very rough crossing there, and I'd always float up on the top deck on the journey, because while I was laying flat, I was all right. Whether it was rain or whatever, Anyway, at this time I bought a pound of butter back, and I got it in my pocket and thought any more about it. When I got on the train from Liverpool, I got this thing upstairs, put my hand in the pocket, and it was all molten.
Oh, that's really grim.
But I remember sending preserved fruit back by post from Dublin. And one time I brought a turkey back. It was plucked, but it was, I'd got an old tie. How you got away with it? And I got the tie around its neck and the tie around its feet, and I'd got it over my shoulder, so I brought the turkey.
Well, like a scarf.
Yeah. And another time, this butcher I was staying with, he said, I'll pack up some meat for you. So he did. He packed up this big parcel of meat and wrapped it up in paper and string and all the rest, gave it to me. Of course, on the top deck, got wet, all the paper went there, I've got just this. So I bought a newspaper and just wrapped it up in that. And that was rationing from Ireland.
Yeah. So, let's have a look. You've got, one of these questions here is, how many houses have you actually built?
Not many. On my own. 10, I think, all told. It's not many really for life as a builder.
But you worked on lots more though.
Oh, yeah, we did quite a lot of church work and that sort of stuff, office work.
What's been your favourite thing to build?
Oh, houses.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed that most.
Yeah. And it's swimming pools you've put here, Uncle Bill. You built swimming pools?
One. We hand dug a swimming pool, which was quite a big one really. You couldn't, in those days you didn't have these little diggers that you get now, so it was there were big diggers, but you couldn't have got it round behind this place. So we dug this thing by hand. Then we had to move all the sandy soil that came out. I think we had about 24 skip loads of that came away, and the rest of it we raised the rest of the garden up by about 2 feet.
God,
And
that's a
the
big
people with this swimming pool used to come in sort of supervised by the swimming pool companies. And they asked me then if we'd take on their swimming pool, so I said, not bloody likely. one was enough.
Uncle Bill's put here 1,700 yards to Sheila's. That means nothing to me.
Oh, well, that was a bit of a story that I was going to write up about a trip along Main Road from the police station there up until Longlands. But it would have gone into various things that had happened to me or jobs I'd done all the way along there. But it would take a long while to go through. But in the end, the 1,700 yards would have been where Sheila lived.
Who's Sheila?
Sheila Hicks was a girl that Keith and myself met. We were in the Scouts and they were in the Girl Guides, and we had a meeting with the Girl Guides and the Scouts, which was along here, and Sheila turned up, and Gwen, Keith, myself, a few other Scouts, a few other Guides. But anyway, from then on, off and on, Sheila was my girlfriend, I think for about 9 years, off and on. But
how old were you?
I suppose I met her when I was about 16, 15. Might have been more than 9 years. But in the meantime I had various other girls and I'd worked away, and then I'd come back. Sheila was still about and we'd pick up again, and there was nothing like girlfriends now. You didn't get up to that sort of caper. It was all very pure, almost. And eventually I met Mum and I got married. Sheila carried on. Keith, I was his best man. He married Gwen, and I was best man for Keith. He went to live down in Devon, and they had 2 children, Sally and Andrew. And when they were about, well, I think Sally was perhaps 3, about 3, and Andrew was younger. Gwen walked out in front of a car that had stopped on this road. Another car came hounding down the other side and killed Gwen. So that was a real tragedy. Anyway, Keith, his mother-in-law, came down to Devon there and helped out for a while, and within about a year, or perhaps a bit longer than that, anyway, eventually Sheila married Keith, and that was that. Okay, they went on, then they had a daughter, Emma, and as I say, I kept in contact with them. We went down for holidays, you remember, down there, and I'd been in contact, seeing them once or twice a year ever since. But then about 2 years ago, Sheila died. Sheila had been ill for a long time. Sheila died, and then last year Keith died. So that was the end of that.
So what about how you met Granny then?
Oh yeah, well, I had a bloke working for me called Peter Mandy. He was a labourer, and he was about my age actually. And he said one day, he said, because we used to go out dancing, because that was the way where you met girls then, dancing.
Where did you go dancing? Whereabouts?
So anyway, he said, I'll go to a place over at Beckenham called Beckenham Ballroom. He said, you can come if you like. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll meet you over there. So I went over on this Saturday night it was, and had a bar there. It was it was nice. It wasn't any of the twists or that sort of dancing. It was all ballroom dancing.
Okay. And you could do that?
Oh yeah. But that was one of your things. You learned the ballroom dance because that was where you met girls. Anyway, went there and I saw Mum was there with a friend. What was her name? Well, never mind what her name was. But anyway, I asked her to dance, and she said yes. So I said, can I take you home? She said, yes, but you'll have to take Audrey as well. So I said, yeah, all right. I've got the old van, so I dropped Audrey off first, took Jean home and said, what are you doing next week? She said, well, I'm free. So I went over, had another date. From then on, that was it. 6 months later, we were married.
6 months? Wow.
27, and she was 26. Oh, well, she was widowed.
Yeah, I was going to say, was Granny had been married
She'd been
previously.
married to Paul. She'd married quite young, and he was asthmatic and had a heart attack and died.
It's bad luck. Not terribly bad luck for you, though.
No.
Right. So then, when you got married, you moved back into Barnston.
Yeah.
But that was then this had been split up into
I made it
flats.
into 2 flats, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mother lived downstairs and we lived upstairs. That wasn't very satisfactory.
I was going to say, it must have been a bit of a trial for a bit.
Yeah. So then I found this, which was not much more than a shed for sale up in Perry Street. £600 we paid for it. And after we'd renovated that and extended it a bit, we moved in there. And we were there for 3 years. And it was a lovely cottage, really was nice. And Bill was born. Gillian was born when we were here.
All right.
And then Bill was born at Ivy Cottage. And one day I got in from work and Jean said, oh, we're moving. I said, we're what? She said, we're moving. I said, I'm not moving. I said, this suits me. This is I thought I loved it. Right next to the Sydney Arms. Anyway. She said, well, get in the car. Well, it wasn't. You get in the van and I'll show you. So we got in the van and drove up to the pond at Chislehurst. And it was winter time. It was really cold. Snow. And she said, there we are. So I looked at her, I said, yeah, we're moving. so we didn't know, it was empty, but we didn't know who owned it, anything like that. So we knocked on the door next door, and it was Thompsons lived there, and I knew Thompsons by sight from when they'd lived in Elm Road. And they gave me the address of the person who owned it.
Was that Ted and Rita?
Yeah, Ted and Rita. So they said, but they wanted a few other people who were interested in it. So I said, oh. So I came back and got on the phone and phoned this chap over it. Oh. Well, I don't know, it was quite a way over in the country, about 30 or 40, I can't think of where it was now. And got talking to this chap, and he turned out he was a builder as well. We had a few words. He said, yeah, all right. He said, well, I want so-and-so for it. So I said, yeah, well, all right, that's fine. And I said, here are other people. He said, never mind about that. He said, you can have it. I said, I'll come over and see you tomorrow then. So I went over the next day to there and we agreed on it. But then I hadn't made any arrangements, finances or anything like that. So I came back, and on the Monday, I went to the bank, which was Martin's bank, and it was Eileen Richards' husband. Dickie Richard was the bank manager, and I knew him. And I went in to see him, and I said, I want a bridging loan. He said, what for? I said, well, he knew where I lived. I said, I want to sell my house and buy this one I've seen on the common. He said, he looked at it, he said, how much and for how long? So I said, well, I want so much, and I can't tell you for how long, but I said, I don't think I'll have any trouble selling my place. So he said, well, leave it with me and I'll phone you back. So he phoned me back, he said, I'm sorry, he said, we can't do it. I said, oh, but that's a pity. I said, because I really want it. So he said, well, I'm sorry, because whatever. So I walked along then to Barclays Bank there, and I went in there and I said, can I see in those days you could. I walked in and I said, could I see the manager? Who are you? So I said, so. I was shown into the manager. And oh, he said, yeah, I've seen you board about. I said, yeah, well, I explained what it was. I said, I'm not telling you which bank, but I said, I've been to a bank who my father had been with for so many years, and I'd been for a few years, and they've refused my thing. So he took a few details. He said, well, I can do it off my own back for 1,000. He said, but I think I only wanted about 2,000. He said, but I'll have to get the okay for that. He said, I'll phone you back. So he phoned me back. He said, yeah, you can have it. So I said, well, hang on a minute. I said, I feel I ought really to go back and tell the other chap, which I shouldn't have done really. I should have just taken it. So I went back to Dickie. Oh, he said, oh, well, leave it with me. And I got back home and he found, oh, well, we could do it. I should really have turned around then and said, no, keep it. But I didn't, and that was it. So that was it. And within a matter of weeks, I'd sold the other house, so we only had the loan for a very short time. Well, that was it.
So then you moved to the Hollies.
Moved to the Hollies.
Yeah, and that's when Tom was born.
Tom was born in the Hollies.
He was born in the Hollies.
In the Hollies, yeah.
And then how long did you stay in there before you moved back here?
13 years, and before then my mother died, and she'd been ill for quite some time. She died, and then we couldn't afford to keep both places, so we bought this off the family, sold our own place, did a lot of work on this. We've done a lot of work on the other place, of course, and moved back here.
So when you moved back in here, what was the work you did in here? What have you changed?
Well, then it was this, from the corner there across here was a wall with a window in it there. This was in 2 rooms. Another door like that was there. A great big fire breast here with a fireplace each side, which went right up through the house. So we took all that out.
That's a big job.
Took all this wall out. Built this piece on there.
When we moved in, there were still great big holes between the floors.
Oh, really?
Well, we lived in the caravan in the garden for a couple of months there. We used to go down to planned travel just down there, up into their bathroom at night for a bath.
All 5 of you in the caravan?
Yeah.
Whoa, it's a tight squeeze.
Yeah. Well, we had an awning at the front of it. Yeah, so right.
No problem then.
Yeah.
What's your nickname at school, Grandad?
Well, it was a nickname I inherited from my brother Selwyn. Because when Selwyn was a youngster, he couldn't pronounce all his words. And it was the conker season, you know, and everybody was playing, because you used to play all these games in the streets then, conkers. And he used to say to these older boys, oh, give us a conker, give us a bonker, rather, he couldn't say conker. And he was then called Bonker, and everybody knew him as Bonker Belsham. When he'd left, of course, and then people were still about that remembered him and the nickname, I got the name then, and I was known by everybody as Bonker.
How long did it last for?
I don't know when it dropped off really. I suppose when I was abroad, when I came back. But no, then after that, I could never understand why I wasn't called Wag, because I mean with initials W-A-G, but no, it was Bonker.
Got any other questions?
Tell us about your trip to Bosnia, or the 2 trips to Bosnia.
Oh yeah, well this was time of the Bosnia conflict between Serbs and all that. But anyway, we were at Rotary one day, and it was in the middle of the conflict, and they were talking about the poverty and the refugees and shortage of this and shortage of that, and just without thinking about it, off the cuff, as he usually used to do, John Evans got up and said, well, I'm going to take a lorry down to Bosnia and with supplies, who's going to come with me? So I thought to myself, well, I'd only been widowed for 2 or 3 years then. I said, yeah, I'm free, I'll go. So, and then that was the way it was. There were 5 of us went on that, and we went down to Bosnia. We had John had got this contact with this lorry firm who I used to hire his lorries from, and somebody else had got a contact with somebody with a Range Rover Discovery. So the five of us went down there. We had a collection of all this stuff from everybody we knew, from Rotary and elsewhere, and got a complete full load of supplies, food and clothing, and set off. And that's it. We financed it ourselves through the club and through ourselves. We drove down in a day, driving sort of 2 hours on and 2 hours off, varied it through the vehicles. That was it. We got down there, I can't remember who it was, but John said he'd like to see a bit of what else was going on in the way of, and the others said, well, we think we ought to get back. And I said, well, if we do go back now without having to look round, and I knew John wanted to go, and it was his show really, and I wasn't terribly worried about what happened anyway. So I said, if we don't do it now, we'll always regret it. So John spoke to one of the guides down there. He said, all right, I'll take you around. So we went off in his pickup, the five of us, and we went further into, we didn't go right out to the conflict, but it was going on. We had to pass through a few checkpoints with guns and all the rest of it pointing at us. One episode, I think, as I said, we were on this escarpment looking across this valley, and John, with all his bravado, got this flag out and was stood there waving across, and somebody said, because you could see these vehicles on the other side, somebody said, you realise that they're tanks and there's the other side over there. They're probably seeing you now through the binoculars. So flag went down, we got in the vehicle.
What have you had done to you over your life? You had your tonsils out when you were young?
Oh, I had tonsils out. Well, in those days, the family doctor used to do that. I did it on the kitchen table.
Oh.
I think, well, you would have had anaesthetic. I mean, you can remember the pad over your nose, and they'd drip the ether or whatever it was over your nose. But the whole family had it done at various times. I think they'd only clipped it the first time. But then I had it again, so I had to go then. I was at, that would probably be one of my earliest memories. We had cottage hospitals then. There was one in Birkbeck Road, and the other one was at Cray Valley, but this was at Cray Valley, and I had it done there. And I can remember my father carrying me back from there on his shoulders, back from Cray Valley, which was quite a walk, but he'd walk anyway. I can just remember that. Then I've had both hands done for carpal tunnel. I've had both knees replaced. I've had a hip replaced, and I've had both eyes cataracts done, and various little bits taken off my face.
And you got a pacemaker?
Oh, well, yeah, I'd forgotten about the pacemaker. Otherwise, I'm quite normal.
All your own teeth?
Well, no, I've lost 3 teeth, and I've had 3 capped. But that's it, I can't afford any more.
And what about your foot? Because that is a particularly horrific incident, Grandad.
Oh, that was when I was 3 or 4, I suppose. At that time, behind the art school that had been built along there, at that time, my father had an allotment there, and I was out there one day and he was digging, and I'd got a fork. He said, be careful, he said, you'll put that through your foot. And I took no notice and I put it through my foot. And I'd only got sandals on at the time, and I can remember he carried me home, which wasn't very far, carried me back, and hi.
Hello.
And he carried me back, And the treatment then, they just poured a bottle of iodine through it. Nowadays, of
No
course,
stitches.
no, well, it was only a puncture mark, top and bottom. Nowadays, you'd have had anti-tetanus injections and all sorts.
Yeah. Did it take long to heal?
Oh, I can't remember that. Not long, I shouldn't think.
Talking about the art school,
Yeah,
you had a van with a canvas top at one point,
yeah.
and which of the Rolling Stones, was it Keith Richards went to the art school there?
I don't know which one did, but one of them did. And this winters, I used to park. It was an unmade road then here. I used to park the van. It was an old Ford Thames with this fabric top. And one particular night we got heavy. We used to get a lot of snow then. We got quite heavy snow, and the whole van was covered in snow right the way over. And somebody, I think it was probably him, who always thought at the time it was, had walked up over the bonnet, right over the roof, and as he went, his foot had gone through the foot marks right down the other side. I wasn't very pleased about that.
Is that Grassington Road?
Grassington Road.
Yeah, it was Keith Richards.
Was it?
How do you know that? Look
Just
him up.
Wikipedia. It was at Art College in Grassington Road, Sidcup.
Sounds like the sort of thing you'd do.
And your mother was the caretaker there?
My mother was the caretaker there.
Who looked after all the heating, which is why
My
this
father
house was
did
always
the-
warm.
Yeah, my father did the boilers and everything. Yeah.
I want to know about the fleet of Morris Miners you used to have.
About, the fleet of Morris Miners. Yeah, well, I decided to get a second van, and one of Jean's uncles, he worked for the GPO, and he said, well, these Morris Minor vans came on the market every now and again, and they were auctioned, and he said there's one coming up over at somewhere in Essex, I can't remember where.
Chelmsford, wasn't it, that we used to go?
Chelmsford, was it?
I think so.
Yeah, Chelmsford. So went over there this day and bought this Morris Minor van, towed it back with the other van, one of the chaps that worked for me. There were quite a few hilarious and hair-raising episodes with the towing. But brought this back, and after that I don't know, over the years we bought 3 or 4 vans. At one time, Bill had one, Tom had one, Gillian had a Morris Minor car, and I had another Morris Minor van. Bill's was 2 shades of green, Tom's was 2 shades of blue, and mine was cream.
Jill's was purple,
Jill's was
Morello.
Maroon, wasn't it?
Morello cherry, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I've got. Mum must have told me this story. Did one of yours have like just a mat over a hole in there?
Oh, yeah, well mine.
Was
There
it
was
yours?
There was a plug hole. There was a hole in the van which had got a rubber plug. Bung had fitted it. But anyway, this bung wasn't there, but I'd got a mat over it. But when it was wet, because if you went in a puddle, it used to come up and hit off the front axle, I think, and come straight up through this hole if the mat wasn't there. And of course, it's not because they were sitting there on a wet day, they'd lift the mat out, wouldn't they?
Because we used
Thinking I didn't know what.
we used to be taken to school in it.
Ah, right, okay.
And of course, it was just directed straight from that. It just got straight in my face. Muddy road.
Nice.
Yeah, but they used to come home for lunch from school every day. I
You used to pick 'em up?
Yeah, I think I forgot to pick Tom up one day.
Oh, that's very good of you, picking them
Well,
up
I
every
didn't actually
day.
forget. My watch had stopped.
Oh. So you'd pick up every day when they were at school?
Yeah. Used to take them down to school and leave them here, and then they'd walk from here to school because it was early. But also then, on the way back to school, we'd take Auntie Rita and we'd drop her off at Queen Mary's because she works for the WVS.
All in the one car?
All in one van, yeah.
So she'd be in the front, and
Yeah.
we'd be on a cushion in the back on top of all the tools.
I didn't enjoy school until I got to day continuation, when I was doing something I was interested in.
Yeah.
But I wasn't very. I've never had a retentive memory, so I was absolutely no good in exams. I couldn't remember anything. But that was it. I mean, I could never learn the lines. I couldn't remember poetry or anything like that. Yeah,
What were your teachers like?
horrible.
Were they?
Well, no, not horrible. I suppose they were, as they had to be with us kids, because we were a pretty unruly lot. I mean, there was physical punishment then.
Did you ever get it?
Oh yeah, yeah. I used to get, silly me, I used to get the cane regularly at Birkbeck Road for eating sweets.
They cane you for that?
Oh yeah, you came for that. Especially if you've been told enough times. I didn't get anything at central school. I got quite sadistic treatment at Dartford Tech at one time. I mean, technical drawing, the chap there, he was a bit horrible. He'd come, if you offended him in some way, he'd make you hold about 5 drawing boards above your head. And yeah, the old chemistry master, Barr his name was, he used to walk around the back of you and that thing with his heavy ledger, and if he saw somebody who was offending him, he'd bring this ledger straight down on the top of your head. Why there were no actual injuries, I don't know, because more than once I've seen somebody throw the wooden blackboard duster at somebody. I mean, you could have knocked an eye out.
Yeah.
How they got away, I don't know.
So how old were you when you first got caned?
Oh. It was only on, it was on the hand, it wasn't on the back side.
Yeah.
And it was only, you only used to get one, that was enough, mind you.
Yeah.
Well, I could have been about 8, because I left that school at 11. I had a fair number before. But then I used to put a sweet in a handkerchief and suck that, which she was up to that. She was up to that.
And kids at school can't, I mean, we can't even imagine what that must have been like to have been hit by a teacher.
Yeah, but we were given money to buy fish and chips for lunch some days. When we stayed for school, we spent that on sweets. We didn't buy them fish and chips. That's how we were eating sweets.
When Tom was a boy, what was the furthest he managed to get when he ran away?
And Tom, well, it was I only remember actually him running for it once, and that was when we were coming back up from France. Don't know whether you'd have remembered, but it was coming down like steroids. It was terrible, and Tom was he could be quite difficult. Mum used to say it was my fault, but I don't think it was. But we never used to hit it off too well. But anyway, we were coming back up in the caravan from France. We were in this lay-by, and I thought, and he said, well, that's it, I'm off. Opened the door and went out. In the middle of France, middle of the night, pouring with rain. I thought, if he goes now, I'll never find him again. And as he went down, I grabbed his hair. I don't know that I pulled him in by the hair, but he came back in, and that was that. Yeah.
He rearranged the door on your shed, didn't he?
Oh yeah, I've never altered that. I mean, he was a great one for slamming doors, Tom. And I mean, there's one in the shed. I mean, you could see where he slammed it. The doorstop sort of moved over. Another time, the back door. This is the same back door with the glass. You see, there's different coloured glass in the top and bottom. But one of them, because it was a door that was second hand when my father built the house.
Oh.
And he quite liked this door, and I'd preserved it. And but there was a crack across this glass. The glass was a bit loose. I can remember this one day he went out and slammed the door. As he slammed the door, of course the glass fell out. And of course he was horrified. He thought he was really for it. And I could see the funny side of it, because I'd been thinking for some time I'd retire. Anyway, that sobered him up for a bit. Yeah, he had his moments, did Tom. He came in one day from Black Horse Road through, this was when we weren't fighting or arguing, he came in through the back gates there, and as he ran in through the back gate, we had a lilac tree just out there, and there was a branch that went right over, and as he went, he sort of jumped up to grab the branch, and as he did, the branch broke off. Finished up with half the lilac tree. Yeah.
What's your fondest memory with the children?
Fondest?
Yeah.
I think probably when we were on holiday in the Isle of Wight. Remember it?
Yeah.
Just it was a great time. It was lovely weather there. There was a great time. Right, but it was a time that we cured Bill of any future involvement with gambling. we were going right past one of these amusement arcades, and Bill wanted to go in. I said, no, you don't want to go in there. They take all the money. I want to go in there. I said, no. I said, tell you what. I said, where's your money? He gave me, I said, well, see that man in the desk there? I said, yeah. I said, go and give him your money. He said, why would I want to do that? I said, because he's going to have it anyway. You might as well go in there. No. I said, no. I said, all right, and if that's what you want to do, go on, then we'll wait for you. So he went in there, and he was in there about 10 minutes. And he came out, and he was in tears. I've lost all my money, I've lost all my pocket money. I said, well, what did I tell you? So I don't think we kept him without pocket money for all the week, but I think that was probably a lesson he learned. Can't remember anything about Tom. I can just remember in the playgrounds there, all these little trikes. And we used to go out there and play on those. As I say, it was lovely weather and nice time. We were staying in quite some good accommodation too. But that was one of the earliest. And mind you, we had great times with the caravan. Had really good times there.
Did you go on many holidays in the caravan?
Oh yeah, we did. We went to Wales, down in
Angle Bay.
Angle Bay, year after year, quite often down there. We used to, for 2 or 3 years on the trot, we'd go up to the Lake District at Easter. We went to Spain a couple of times. We went to France with it, didn't we?
Yeah.
As I say, we went to Scotland a lot with it, quite a lot.
Did you have a favourite place to visit?
I think, yes, Angle, down in Pembrokeshire, that was probably the favourite place. It was a little village right in the mouth of the Milford Haven. And when I say that there were 3 oil refineries in the bay, there's a power station there, but it was still a lovely spot. It really was. We had a super little campsite there.
Nice little pub that you took the car to.
There's a little pub. If the tide was in, you were stranded there.
Oh, that's a shame.
And this one particular day, I thought, well, we could just make it, but we didn't. And the tide was coming in and it just stopped. So I managed actually to put it in gear. I managed to pull it out on the on the battery just by turning the ignition on, and it just got it up. But the car was never the same after that. It messed up the what's the word? Not the battery.
Alternator?
Which?
Alternator?
Yeah, it messed the alternator up. And as I say, that was when the start of the rust, I think it set in, because it was seawater too.
Mm.
But you were set up, weren't you? Because the kids that you asked how deep it was, they were standing on a brick.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. But the pub was called The Point.
The Point.
And it was a real old hovel of a place, and it had got a fire which never went out. It was summer and winter. It was all, mind you wanted it sometimes because it was quite damp down there. But it was just fed by this coal slack. But what it did for pollution, I don't know. But you used to see these oil tankers coming up through the bay there, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was also when the box girder bridge over Pembroke collapsed, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. That they were constructing this bridge across. It was a continuation of the M4, I think, and where it was supposed to go across the river there, they got part way across, and it just folded. It folded and dropped down. They say that half of it was the construction workers working on it, hadn't got toilets, and they'd be weeing in there.
Oh.
I can't believe that, because it never rusted in that time. But they cut it off and they rebuilt the bridge, got built. But we were put onto that site by Bill and Beryl, because they'd been down there. And they came back and said what a lovely place it was.
What are some of the big differences that you've noticed over the years in how the trade has changed?
Well, in actual carpentry and that, the building trade, just the mechanical age you've got now. I mean, when I first joined my father, which was in 1953, we hadn't even got an electric drill.
So,
We hadn't got a van. The only thing when I joined him was a hand cart with wooden wheels and a wheelbarrow and a few ladders. That was all. And otherwise he had the car, which he used to car a bit. And that was it.
So,
There was no, there were no skips. When they first came out, I said, well, that'll never catch on. Lorries used to come, you used to hand load it with the shovel.
yeah.
If you any foundations to dig, that was all done with pick and shovel.
That's hard work.
It used to think nothing of it. It was part of the job.
What about safety helmets and safety
We
things?
didn't have anything like that. I mean, everything was done off ladders. Very seldom had guardrails on the scaffold.
But did you ever wear a safety hat?
Only in latter years, more for show than anything. Still got their old safety helmets
Yeah,
kicking about.
I've seen some of them. I don't think I've ever seen a picture of you wearing one.
Yeah, well, I had a white one. All my men had yellow ones.
I think there's a couple of those upstairs still.
Mm.
One with K on it,
Yeah.
with an R on it.
Yeah.
Tell you what there is knocking about, there's a fireman's helmet. There's a
Yeah, I
story
remember
on
that.
And
Yeah,
for
that's
years
upstairs.
we lost that until we opened up the caravan and found it sitting on the caravan
was
seat.
it?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
how did you come to have fireman's helmets?
Well, I don't know, somebody bought it for me because I was always keen on fire engines and that.
You used to like chasing fire
I used
engines,
to
didn't you?
I was chasing fire engines.
Like a good fire.
Well, that's all part of another story here, isn't it? The one that I think Bill's talking about was when we were quite young here. My father used to smoke, and we had an open fire No, it wasn't there. I can't think where it was. But anyway, this particular night, we smelled smoke, and the place was pretty smoky. We phoned the fire brigade. And by that time, we found it was the armchair was on fire. I think a spark from the fire or something had got it, but I think it was probably my father's cigarette, I don't know. But anyway, the fire brigade was called, and by that time it wasn't much of a fire, but it was burning. And the fire brigade came in, all their dirty feet and the hose pipe and all those things. Gwen met them at the door and she said, "You're not bringing that in here. You take the chair outside."
Did they do it?
They did. They picked the chair up and walked it out the front.
Mind you, I wouldn't have liked to say no to Auntie Gwen.
Yeah, Gwen.
She was formidable, wasn't she?
She didn't take prisoners.
No, she didn't.
She could be.
What's your favourite memory about Auntie Gwen then?
Not really, I mean, it's just generally.
There were more than one occasion when you set fire to things.
Set fire to things.
Well, you burnt stuff.
What? In the course of my job?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 occasions really. Once was at Dr. Barnard's place. We were doing some work there, some plumbing work, and I'd got the blow lamp going, wiping this joint, and then I could smell smoke, and I looked through the cracks in the boards, and I could see the sort of sparks and not flame, but smoke and stuff coming. And I looked, put my hand in, and they'd insulated the floors with hay years before, and this had caught. So I managed to drag it out, and managed to put it out. So that was all right. And another time, I was doing a job for a girlfriend's mother of mine. What was her name? Judy Upshon. And it was in this airing cupboard. And as I think it was, there were pipes of frozen, I was thawing out the front. And I saw this flame set off up there, and it went up through this hole, up into the loft. And I don't know how I did it, but I jumped up and managed to grab the loft cover off and pulled myself up and managed to pull it out. But that was the only 2 episodes, I think, I don't remember.
Close calls.
You did manage to flood the drains down Hatherley Road with a whole load of petrol at one point, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I did that. Yeah. What was happening, that was another job we dug out. You know these big petrol tanks that go in?
Yeah.
Well, I'd just got up, right, we got this job for Hatherley Garage, and we had to take this old 500-gallon tank out that had been there for years and put a 3,000-gallon tank in, I think. And to do that, we had to dig this hole. I think it was 13 feet deep and big enough to take this. But anyway, when we uncovered the small tank, we had to get a crane in to pull it out, and the chap said, "You've got petrol in it?" So I said, "Don't know, I wouldn't think so." So he said, "Well, I'm not going to move it if it's got petrol in it." So I said, "Well, I'll tell you what," I said, we'll fill it with water. All right, so we filled it with water. So we lifted this tank out, put it on dropped it down on the side, and the crane went off. And then, of course, the problem was to get rid of the water. And hadn't realised, of course, that the petrol would have risen to the top. So we tipped it over, and this water and petrol and the whole lot tipped up, went from top to bottom of Hatherley Road, underneath cars parked there, all the way down. And I thought, oh, this could be good. Somebody drops a cigarette in this, there'll be a sheet of flame all the way down. I thought, well, what am I going to do about this? So I jumped in the van and went up to the fire station I knocked on the door, rang the bell outside. He came out and said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Well, we've had an accident. We've accidentally tipped it. We hadn't accidentally tipped it over. We'd accidentally tipped this tank over and this water and petrol has run down the road." "Oh," he said, "hang on." He said, "I have to phone Bromley, see what we can do about this." I thought, this is good. He said, "Oh, right. Right. We can do it." So the fire engine came out, all bells and sirens and everything, belled it down, and they washed all the road down from top to bottom. And I thought, well, I'm going to be in trouble there. So the chap said, well, I said, it's a false alarm with good intention. We managed to get away with it.
Well,
This, of course, was the fire station that caught fire.
Oh, this was the fire station some years ago. Whether this is absolute truth or not, I don't know. But the story goes that the Sidcup firemen were all having their lunch, sitting around the table, and all of a sudden a fire engine turned up outside and they all ran in, and this chap said, "What are you here for?" He said, "We're here to put you out, your roof's on fire." I think it's true.
I've got one. I might be getting mixed up here, but did you have any incidents with mains power?
Oh, yes. You're talking about Hanley Green in Bull Lane, eh? Well, this was after Mum had died, and I'd gone back, because while she was ill, I'd stopped work. I'd already got rid of the men some time before, so I was on my own then. But one particular job at Hanley Green for the Fishers, they'd waited for me for 2 years to do this job. So when I went back to work, I'd got this job, it was pretty well finished, and I'd got this soakaway to dig in the drive. Well, this soakaway was about 5 foot in diameter and about 6 or 7 foot deep. So I dug this out. I was there on my own, and I got down to about a foot on one place. I came across the power cables into the house, and although I'd just touched it, it was armour plated, it was all right, so I knew where it was. Anyway, I got this thing dug and went to dig the trench out to bring the pipe into it, and about 3 inches down, with a pickaxe, all of a sudden a great big flash, and I'd hit a power cable. So I uncovered it and found it was a redundant one that had been cut off years before and just left the open end, or it had been taped up, just left this old cable, and it was just 3 inches under the surface. So I rang up the electricity board, and the first thing they asked was, "Oh yeah, what's the name of your insurance company?" So I said, "What do you want to know that for?" They said, well, you'll have to claim that on your insurance." I said, "I'm not claiming it on my insurance." I said, "That's your fault. You've left a cable there that had been cut off at some time, and you're lucky you're not being, sued or brought up for a death." Anyway, there was a bit of an argument about it, and in the end they said, "Well, all right, now this was late morning this happened." So they came round and looked at it, and they never came round then until about 5 o'clock, just as it was getting dark. They turned up with the team. Well, they just wanted the overtime, these blokes.
Right.
And with that, of course, they cut off all that area of Chislehurst. They just everybody's at home cooking dinner. All the electric went off.
Tell us the story about St Peter's Quay over in the church.
Oh, that was my father. When he'd been, because he used to, before he was on his own, when he worked for Webb's, one of their jobs occasionally was to dust the higher parts of the church, which never get done now, but they used to do it on ladders. And one day, the last thing they were doing, they were just bringing the ladders away, and he caught the ladder on the keys on the statue, the stone statue. Peter knocked the keys off, fell, and he picked it up and he cemented it back on. They're still there, crooked. When you look at it now, you can still see it.
You've done a lot of work in the church.
Done a lot of
What have you
work.
done over the years?
Well, in the church itself, loads of things. There's one or two oak cabinets and chests that we've made, or other chests that I've made out of old pews. Well, I'd have to walk around the church with you, show you various things.
You were rebuilding some of the church yard wall at one point, and there's a skull rolled out, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, we were one of the churchyard wall had crumbled away, and we were rebuilding it and cutting the earth back from the other side to get it back, and this skull rolled out. Anyway, at that time there was an advert on television for this hair restorer called Vitalis. He immediately called Vitalis. I said to the vicar, I said, we've just got this skull, and what am I going to do with it? He said, well, stick it back in the wall. So it got a new ceremony.
And how did you end up being the chap that digs all the holes now for the ashes?
Well, I've dug my last one. I'm not digging anymore now. But I've done it for 35 years, I think. I think we were working on the house on the corner, I think, or somewhere about there. And Gwyn Harper, that's Chris Harper's father, had died. And somebody from the church came over and said, oh, could you dig a hole for these ashes? It's one of the first ones we interred over there. So I dug this one. From then on I got the job, so I used to do that every time.
And how deep do they go? About 18 inches?
2 feet.
2 feet. Did you have an Airedale dog at one point that didn't like the dog in the newsagents?
No, that's we didn't. The newsagent had this Airedale, and we had a dog called Skippy. Yeah, Skippy, and he was a wire-haired terrier, and his main ambition in life was to fight other dogs. And he was only a little fellow, but it didn't matter what size dog Skippy had got a feel about any other dog he would go for. But he had a particular enemy, was this Airedale dog of the newsagent on the Cullies. And if ever they got together, walking along the road there in front of it one day, the Airedale was looking out of the top window, saw Skippy, leapt out of the window on the shop blind, slid down that landed on.
Like a cartoon.
And away they went. But I've seen people separate our dog, with other dogs in a shop doorway in the high street. People with brooms pulling them apart. But he was a lovely dog.
What about Butch?
Which?
Butch.
Books?
Butch.
Oh, Butch. Well, that was, we all remember Butch. He was a Jack Russell. We got him for a place down in Ashford. I don't know what, that was when we'd moved back here?
Yeah.
Yeah. We went to Ashford and to this breeder, and he said, yeah, well, we've got a broken haired one over there. And I said, where's his mother, the bitch? Oh, he said, over here. So he called out and said, Rosie! And with that, about 4 dogs. He got about 4 Rosies there. And that's it. But Butch was He was a great dog, wasn't he?
He was, wasn't he?
Great. Mm. Yeah, he's a good character. He committed suicide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How?
Go into that.
Well, when Mum was really ill, they hadn't diagnosed really what the trouble was then, but they said, you just can't have the dog in the house anymore. It's the hair and everything, that's what's a lot to do with what's the trouble. It wasn't actually, but anyway. So she was in and out of hospital at the time, and Butch we had to keep outside. I built a kennel for him. He never got to the kennel actually, but he was absolutely dejected because he thought he'd been, abandoned, and you could see him. He went downhill. He really looked dejected all the time. And I was out. She was in hospital at the time, and I was out as I was walking up St John's Road, and he was on the lead, and all of a sudden he just took off, took the lead out of my hand and ran straight out across the high street, and Bilk's van got him. Didn't kill him. He was unconscious, and I picked him up and brought him home and took him over to the vet over at Bexley Heath then, because my friend Peter Hannaford, he wasn't there at the time, and these two Australian vets said, well, he's unconscious, he might come round, what he'd be like when he comes round, he might be all right, might not be. So I said, well, better put him down. So I had him put down then, and that was that. Whether he would have, I don't think he would have made any good after that.
You know the other half to that story.
No.
You know what Mum said to me?
No.
When she used to dream, and she dreamt of Butch running towards her, and somebody saying, no, she said to him, no, don't jump up. And then somebody said, no, it's all right now, Gene.
Yeah.
Which is...
Anyway, that was a sad note.
Yeah, I know, I wish I hadn't asked that question.
What about the old English sheepdog, Bess, that we had in the Ivy Cottage? Is it right that it bit me and I bit it, or the other way round?
Can't remember that bit. I know we did have I don't know which dog, we had one. It was Bess. It was her dog, and we were living in the Hollies then. We'd had a hard winter, and all the time the winter went on for some weeks. Soon after we got there, and the ice was frozen, and every time we used to take him out at night, we used to walk straight out of the house, across the ice, across the pond, and onto the common. Well, this particular night we'd had a thaw, so that the ice had melted, and came out. Bess set off across the pond, because straight in, came out, and of course, being as the ice had been there for about 5 or 6 weeks, it stank. It was just like rotten eggs.
Gross.
Oh, she did smell.
Did you ever have to pull anyone out of that pond?
Yeah, once I was a hero. Not really, but I was coming back in the van in the evening, back from Sidcup, and coming across the top to come down. I saw this child right out in the middle of the pond, and had broken through the ice, and she was up to about here in the ice, and there were people standing on the footpath around the side looking at it, you see. And I stopped the van. Now I knew how deep the water was because I waded out to get boats. You know? I knew there was no danger in it, but there was a policeman standing there as well. And I thought, well, why hasn't he gone in? So I thought, well, so I jumped out of the van, ran across and stumped away through the ice out, picked the child up, carried her out. And as I came out, this policeman said, "Oh," he said, "I'm glad you did that." He said, "I didn't want to get wet because I'm on duty all night."
Just couldn't leave it to drown.
So I took this child into the house, and Mum said, so she picked this child up, took her straight up and dumped her in a warm bath, and phoned her mother. And the mother came round and picked her up. That was the end of my heroics.
That's quite a nice heroic story.
Yeah. Yeah, me a brave fella going out in 3 feet of water.
I'm braver than the policeman.
Mind you, my legs were cold till about the Wednesday after.
Yeah.
It was cold. My cousin Jack was brilliant. He really was brilliant. But, he was schizophrenic. He was always a bit of a peculiar bloke. But only son, and they doted on him anyway. He married
This is your mum's sister's
my mother's
son.
sister's son. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Oh, I don't know what her name was.
Can't think now. Older rather. But anyway, he was in and out of the mental hospital. He came out, and then he was on whatever medicine they're on. But he hadn't regularly been taking it. But he she came home one day, and he said about her and killed her. So, and unfortunately, one of the girls came home from school she found, and he had tried to commit suicide but hadn't been successful, and police came and all the rest of it. But that was my episode at the Old Bailey when I went up to see him. He wasn't actually sentenced. All they said, well, he was committed to. He went to Broadmoor for a few years, came out, and then he became a teacher. And
Oh my word.
for older
times.
But then for a period, we had Anne and Joe living with us for a short while, but that didn't work out too much. It was too much for Mum. But they were not adopted, what's it? Fostered. And they both turned out quite successful, got families.
I can't believe you came out and became a teacher. I can't believe you
Don't let
became
anyone
a
do
teacher. It was another time.
They did quite well at it.
Well, I remember after he came round to see us,
Yeah.
and porridge was on television. Do you remember? And it was the governor was being served tea by one of the inmates or one of the prisoners, and after they'd gone out, the governor said, "Well, what's this guy in for?" He said, "Oh, he killed his wife."
I know after that, with the police involved and all the rest of it, I was involved with the house and dealing with after that. And that it was really in a terrible state, blood soaked everywhere.
Oh my.
And I said to the police, I said, well, what happens to this lot then? They said, it's up to you. And Ralph came down with me, and Ralph had been in the Army Medical Corps. Although he hadn't been a surgeon or a doctor or anything like that, he'd been dealing with blood quite a lot. But he fetched up. And I don't know how I managed it. But we got this blood-soaked carpet up, and I put it in the van. I thought, well, what am I going to do with this? So I took it up to the local council depot and said, I've got this blood-soaked carpet here. Been a murder. What do I do? He said, stick it over there. And that was it. Yeah. And then a few months after that, the police got in touch with me. They said, oh, we've got some stuff we want you to pick up. I said, what's that? He said, we've got some knives here. I said, well, can you get rid of them? I don't particularly. All right, we'll do that. So that was one day. But, yeah, I used to go and visit Jack at Broadmoor a few times, and at that time, once you were in there, you were walking around with all the quite normal, seeming people.
Yeah.
No trouble at all. But Jack, I mean, I saw him a few times then when he came out, and he made a life for himself. And the girls have always, I don't know, forgiven him, but they got on quite well with him after that.
Yeah. I suppose if you're not well, it's different.
Yeah, she didn't deserve that.
No.
But I mean, you could see it, if you thought about it afterwards, you'd see it coming up to it, because once or twice I've been down there to replace broken windows in doors and things. And never realised quite why, but he'd do.
But you and he used to go to Heswall for your summer holidays, didn't you?
Oh yeah, we did. We used to get rid of up to Heswall for part of our summer holidays. Yeah, we used to get on all right up there.
What was there?
That was my grandmother's place.
Oh.
And my uncle built it. How he used to put up with this, I don't know, because every day he'd take us round to his various jobs that we're doing, and we'd follow him around and be under his feet all the time. But he was good, Tom.
What did his job was?
He was a builder.
He was the builder, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But he built quite a lot of houses, and did a lot during the war in Liverpool and that. And he had his own mortar mill. He used to. I think he did very well out of the war, because I don't really know what a mortar mill is. It's I don't have them now, but now they use sand and cement if they're building something. But what was used for centuries before, and still should be really, was lime and sand, or slate lime, but or crushed stone, or bricks and stuff. But anyway, this mortar mill he got with two great big iron wheels that revolved round. You used to see, and he used to be building air raid shelters in Liverpool. So they'd go over with the lorry in the morning with mortar that they'd mixed up in their own yard, enough mortar for the day, spend the day building brick shelters, and then load the lorry up with brick rubble from places that had been demolished, soft brick rubble, bring it back that evening. They'd run it through the mortar mill, so they got another load of mortar to take. So he was buying and selling it the same stuff.
Huh. That's a great job. And so you just let you and your cousin just kick it on these building sites round with him?
Oh yeah. I mean, there was all this dangerous stuff about, but nobody used to worry about it. You'd follow them up on the scaffold or...
It's amazing more injuries didn't happen.
Yeah, it was. I think people were more aware of, well, they're more aware of danger now, I suppose, but we never used to think so much about it.
No.
There were accidents, I suppose, but... I mean, I can't remember many deaths in the building trade that I've sort of known of. One I can remember, a firm called Jaggers. They were doing a trench somewhere down at Lammerby, and the walls collapsed and the bloke got buried. And another episode was an old mate of my father's, he'd worked with years before, called Bob Childs. He fell off a ladder Crescent Road, and on the way down hit his head on a fence post. That killed him. But this particular Bob Childs, he was quite a character really. I can remember my father telling me, because when he'd worked for Webb's, or after that, I mean, they'd either use the firm's hand cart or their own bike or go on the bus or whatever. And my father was cycling through the high street with a lavatory pan on his shoulder.
As you do.
People, yes you do. And Bob Childs from the other side of the road came and said, "Not feeling so well this morning, Will?" And this, another episode my father told me about was along Main Road. In those days, paint pots, now we've got quite a secure handle on paint pots, but they'd be just a wire and a couple of loops used to hold them. And Bob Childs was riding down there with a pot of red oxide paint on his handlebars, just hanging on the handlebars. Hit a bump in the road and the wire broke, and the pot of, it's still got its lid on, dropped on the road, rolled across the road just as the bus was coming past. The bus, because this struck me as being funny, but it wasn't really. Just as the bus went over this pot of red oxide paint, a woman was walking up on the pavement. The bus crushed the pot. The oxide paint went straight over this woman. So I said to my father, I said, well, what did he do? He said, well, he rode on, didn't he? But thinking about it, what would you do? and what did the woman do?
God, that poor woman. Probably just on the way to the bakery.
Not funny, really.
It is a bit.
Talking about things falling off vehicles, have you ever had any incidents?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I was coming back from Kent, and we were working at Raggleswood in Chislehurst as well, and I'd got, from the joinery works, I'd got 2 sets of wooden garage doors on the little van on the top, and I'd picked up some other wood and dropped this off on this job at Raggleswood, and my own fault, I left one of my blokes to tie the doors back on. And that's it, never thought more of it. Came home, parked up at Chislehurst, had lunch, and I was bringing back the bill. I don't know whether it was all 3 of you or whether it was just Gillian and Tom. Bringing him back, we're coming down Elm Road to the traffic lights, and a bus had stopped, and a woman got out of this bus and walked round the back of this bus without looking, and she'd got these cardboard boxes up in front of her like that. She walked straight out across the road, never looked at me at all. I put the brakes on, and the van stopped, but the doors didn't. So these doors came out, just right out across the road, took both the wing mirrors off the car, and landed up with a clatter in the middle of the road. And by this time I think, oh,
I wasn't there.
no, you weren't. But the other, I said, we go to school. And they went off to school, and there was anyway, a bloke was standing at the other bus stop, the other road. He came across the road and gave me a hand, and we just put him on the top of the van, and that was it. It was very lucky.
Missed the woman, though? Missed the woman?
Yeah, she heard this clatter, she never looked round, she just walked on. As you would.
As you would.
But otherwise, no.